So welcome to the CITT Toronto Area Council podcast, the place where supply chain industry leaders discuss the big issues one strategic challenge at a time. I'm Tom Paul, CCLP. I'm the chair of the CITT Toronto Area Council, and I'm hosting tonight's discussion on the topic of blockchain. I'm joined tonight by my fellow CCLPs, Grace DeMarca, Valerie Kucherenko, and Gary Newbury. And our special guest this evening is Erik Valiquette, the president of the Canadian Blockchain Supply Chain Association. So maybe we can start just with a little bit of background on the Blockchain Supply Chain Association and perhaps a little bit about yourself, Erik. Can you just let us know a little bit about the history, how you wound up getting involved with the Blockchain Supply Chain Association?
Yeah, absolutely, Dan. Thanks for having me. Happy to be on with you guys. Appreciate the time to talk about blockchain. I come from the logistics world. I grew up with the freight forwarders and the customs brokers of the world. I've been in it for about 30 years, and I've always been a big fan of continuous improvement and making things a bit better. And always been a big fan of technology advancements as well. And like I was telling you guys before we started the recording, I am by no means a technology person, but I am very passionate about this. And about 3-4 years ago, when the word blockchain came around, not from a Bitcoin perspective, and I think we'll talk about that a bit later, but really from a technology perspective, I got really interested, started reading up on it, and at one point back in 2019, we're having some conversations with other folks in the industry about how blockchain is evolving and what was happening in Canada, and we kind of realized that we didn't have a resource to go to find out what Canada was doing from a blockchain and supply chain perspective, right? So that's why we just said, let's start an association, and that's what we did. We started the Canadian Blockchain Supply Chain Association to be a resource for the Canadian side of the supply chain industry. And yes, supply chain is global, but you have some great voices in the US, you have some great voices in Asia and Europe, and we didn't have at that time a great voice for the supply chain ecosystem here in Canada, and that's why we started.
And that was just a couple of years ago, I guess, 2019, you said?
Yeah, absolutely. Late 2019, started doing some real work last year in 2020, couple of weeks before pandemic hit us all. So we've been managing, like everybody else out here, a pandemic and trying to grow at the same time.
Great. Grace, do you want to start us off?
Sure. So our first question this evening is, what is blockchain?
And that is a great question. And thank you for starting off with that. And blockchain, and I'll say it again, blockchain is not Bitcoin. Bitcoin is blockchain. So blockchain is a technology, right? It's a technology stack like you have other technologies out there that's driving platforms. And if we were to use a better term, I would have to use distributed ledger technology. And that better explains what blockchain is. Blockchain is pretty much what that word says, right? It's a great buzzword for a series of blocks that are attached together using crypto, and not cryptocurrency, but cryptography, to follow a track of information. So using that, you can have great things talking to each other. You can have different platforms talking to each other. And it's not just about the finance side of things. It's really about the technology side of things.
Okay, so then our next question is, how are blockchain and Bitcoin related?
So Bitcoin is based on blockchain or distributed ledger technology. So, and Bitcoin, as you know, and Ethers are cryptocurrencies. So they're virtual currencies. And I'm by no means an expert in cryptocurrencies, but they're made for trading, right? Blockchain in the supply chain world is more for exchanging information. They're a distributed ledger technology that you can use to exchange information, to track information. And I'll give you a great example of a distributed ledger. So think of a ledger, right? You're writing your transactions, you're going to the bank, you're taking money in, you're taking money out. Those are transactions. But in supply chain, it's not just about the money, it's about the information, it's about cargo, it's about something. You're exchanging it between different partners, and you need to track those transactions somewhere, right? You're picking up, you're delivering, you're giving to another carrier, you're picking up, you're delivering, giving to another carrier, etc. Those are all transactions, and those are the type of transactions that you can follow on a distributed ledger. And the distributed side of that means that everybody has a copy of the ledger at the same time and in the same fashion. And that's what the beauty of blockchain is that it's a better way to exchange information.
Hey, Erik, it's Gary. I'm kind of floundering on this question. What are the different types, if there are different types of blockchain, or have we actually got an industrial standard? Everyone's agreed who's doing blockchain all work on one standard, because that hasn't happened in things like RFID. And what are their typical use cases? You know, where is this applied? You've talked about the broad supply chain, but perhaps we can go into a bit more detail on that. And what makes one, if there are different types of blockchain, one more suitable for a supply chain setting than others, and what may be the choices around that? And what are the important choices or factors we ought to consider as we think about blockchain and about how to deploy that technology within our environment, within our ecosystem? So there's a lot of questions in there, but I'm sure there's one or two very quick answers that you can.
Oh, great questions, absolutely. And you know, to start off with your first one, what are the types of blockchain out there? We typically talk about two different types. We have a public blockchain, like a Bitcoin, that is a public blockchain, right? If you have a hash, if you have a transaction number, you can go on a browser, look at the information. Most of the information about that transaction is actually public. But you also have private blockchains that are between parties that agree to participate in that blockchain. So these transactions are just happening between those parties. So if you and I create a private blockchain, we are the only ones that have access to that information, right? From an industry perspective, from a supply chain perspective, people tend to gravitate towards private blockchains because you don't want all your industrial secrets out there for everybody to see. There are ways to put your information or some information on a public blockchain to make it more accessible. But in industry, we tend to talk about private blockchains more than anything else.
Okay. So could you, just on that point, is it one or the other, or can you have effectively a private network or blockchain where some parts of it might be accessible to people, the public, say? Are these things that you can kind of toggle on and off at the individual node level, or?
Toggling, probably not. And again, I'm not the technology deep coding expert here, but typically you would choose public versus private for specific reasons. But even in a private blockchain, you can share information publicly, and we'll see some great examples of that a bit later on.
Okay. Okay. So, on the basis that you've got a private or public, let's focus on the private one. When it's all set up and it's kind of working, I understand that blockchain gives us great visibility as to where the thing broke down. I think that's true.
Absolutely.
But are we actually in hands of, although it sounds a technology that must be automated and all those good things that go with technology, are we still in the hands of people actually updating a ledger? And therefore, if we're trying to fault check, to find out where the fault was as we as a product goes through our supply chain or is experienced by the consumer, and we kind of trace it back to this node or this module of the supply chain. If we're actually still in the hands of people, certainly in domains outside, say, Canada or outside North America, is there a risk that the information that we're using is no more robust in some ways than if it was being done on a manual basis?
So basically, you're asking me, is it still garbage in, garbage out, right? Will it solve that, right? And the answer, the quick answer is no, it won't solve everything, right? It's not perfect for everything. It won't resolve data entry errors. It won't resolve human error. But what it does do is keep a permanent record of that information. You can't go and correct a transaction. You need to add another transaction down the line for that. And so that leaves a beautiful record for auditing purposes, for information sharing purposes as well. And the other side of that is smart contracts. And smart contracts are another important part of what blockchain does. It's the automation portion of it. So will it resolve everything? No. Down the line, will we be able to automate a lot more? Absolutely.
Yeah.
Interesting. Thank you, Eric, for answering all those questions. My question is based on the fact that blockchain concept itself is based on peer-to-peer interaction. So in the future, when these blockchains are implemented, how will them, if they, affect the supply chain and interaction between different stakeholders within the supply chain?
Another great question. So my vision, and I think we all would love better handling of our information, right? Think of how many times a single data point is exchanged. Think of the weight of a box, or think of a SKU, right? How many times do we exchange that information in a supply chain? Again, manufacturer in China, local company in China picking it up, bringing it to a terminal, bringing it to a freight forwarder, bringing it to a carrier, crossing the ocean, reverse that transaction down here in Canada, right? Arrives on a vessel, terminal takes it off, gives it to a trucker, freight forwarder is involved, customs is involved. That one piece of information is traded so many times that if we can automate and better share all those data points in a single shipment, and some people say there are up to 200 data points in a single shipment sometimes, right? From SKU to color, to weight, to location, to carrier name, and even within a carrier, you have different transactions sometimes. Just sharing that information in a better way will simplify, will clean up, hopefully, the information that we share. And again, going back to smart contracts, we'll be able to automate certain portions of it. One of my frustrations when I started thinking and looking at blockchain was that poor data quality that we in the logistics world were dishing out. I remember cleaning up databases. I remember just going over reports and Excel files for hours and hours trying to make sense of something that was nonsense in the end, because one person made a one error at one point, and it trickled down all to until the end to the other partners. We have to do a better way of sharing information. We have to do a better way of automating information as well, if we're to be more competitive, right, with other supply chains. And I think COVID showed us how important a competitive supply chain needs to be, and just move together as a community to make the whole process even easier.
So, Eric, within the geographically extended supply chains that we have across time zones, across thousands and thousands of kilometers, etc., different currencies, different levels of maturity, different attention to details, and those kind of things. How does blockchain help us to kind of deal with some of these challenges?
So the example that I just gave of that shipment coming from China, right? Imagine if, and it's happening today, imagine if you're the terminal operator or the port here in Canada, right? In the good old days, meaning yesterday or the day before or last week, excuse me, you had to wait until typically the vessel arrived, that the captain would come down with a pile of paperwork. Okay, I'm exaggerating, maybe, 10, 15, 20 years ago, but, he would walk down with this big pile of paperwork called a manifest, give that to somebody to sort through, bring it maybe to customs, split it, send it with couriers to the different customs brokers, right? That took a lot of manpower and that took a lot of time. So imagine today with blockchain, the instant that a container is picked up in India or in China or in Vietnam or in Germany or anywhere else, the instant that it's picked up, scanned, put into a common database, right? Without being a common database, but a shared database, a shared ledger. Imagine knowing instantaneously that in 30 days, you'll have a container arrive at your port and that you can start planning your labor and your resources, right? And that's what's being done today with certain blockchain platforms. Port of Montreal on TradeLens knows when a shipment is being picked up in India. They know when it's coming to Montreal, they can start planning right away.
Okay.
So as service providers, imagine if you have all the information well ahead, you can start planning a lot more. You can plan your resources, you can make better decisions with the information you have, and that's what blockchain brings.
Yeah, so would it be right saying one of the big opportunities is the improvement in efficiencies and also the transparency and just the visibility of information and being able to make more timely, relevant decisions as in real time, as opposed to waiting for somebody, as you suggested, to process all the paperwork and run around in a firefight. So it sounds like a good thing. So when we turn our attention to Canada, what retailers do you know that are actively implementing or at least moving forward with blockchain?
One of the great examples of blockchain being used in Canada is Walmart Canada. Walmart Canada has been paying, I think, upwards of 65 of their outsourced trucking companies based on a blockchain platform. So, we all know Walmart. Walmart has a lot of power. They kind of, set the rules. They have their terms and conditions, complex supply chains as well. So they had an issue where 70% of their freight invoices to their partner carriers were in dispute, right? So shipments being picked up from a DC, gets to a Walmart store, there's waiting time, right? Waiting time is the bane of freight payment, right? Accessorial charges. So, carrier invoices waiting time, sends the paper invoice or, an Excel spreadsheet or something to Walmart. Walmart sorts it. They say, oh, no, I don't agree with this extra charge. Sends it back to carrier, 10 different emails going back and forth, right? So the dispute process is heavy and burdensome and slows down payments. In the Walmart process before, they had identified 11 steps to pay a single freight invoice. I think they have something like 50,000 freight invoices a month in Canada alone. So imagine that, right? So on this blockchain platform that was created by DLT Labs of Toronto, and apparently now one of the biggest production blockchain platforms in the world, right here in Canada, Walmart is paying their freight carriers much faster. And by having a shared ledger, by having everybody on a same platform, they can make decisions right away. So with the example of that waiting time, if it's identified right away using IoT that the truck's been there for 3 hours, and I'm, just giving examples here, I don't know what the specifics are, but the truck's been there for 3 hours, somebody can raise a flag automatically in the system, say, hey, Walmart, what's going on, right? They can make phone calls right away, or they can actually, call the carrier, say what's going on. They can respond to that issue right away. And the issue is resolved before it gets to an actual creation of an invoice. So they are co-creating invoices together. And that's the best thing I've heard in a long time. They're co-creating invoices instead of, a one-way transaction. They're doing it together at the same time, resolving issues at the same time. And by doing that, they've been able to reduce their outstanding, sorry, I'm looking for my words here, their outstanding issues around invoicing from 70%, their disputes from 70% down to 2%. And I think it's actually below 2% now. And the steps that it takes to pay a freight invoice is from 11 down to 5. So they've streamlined the whole process greatly. They've accelerated their payments to their partner carriers. So carrier is happy, and they're at a point now where they can say, hey, Mr. Carrier, I'm paying you faster. Can you give me a discount? Right? So everybody's happy. Carrier is happy. Their cash flows improve there. Walmart is happy. They can have some savings around processing payments and carrier discounts. So everybody's happy, and that's the great example. Another retailer here in Canada that is using blockchain, and I don't know as much about it, is Shoppers Drug Mart. They're tracking their cannabis sales on a blockchain. And that's right here in Canada as well. And a final example that I found very interesting was actually in Vietnam. Knorr soups in Vietnam are really popular, and they're a pork soup. Everybody loves them, but a competitor was coming in with a cheaper pork soup, right? So Knorr was losing market share. But what the consumer didn't know is that this lower cost competitor was not using certified ingredients. And that, again, is very important for the consumer in Vietnam. So what Unilever or Knorr did is put a QR code on every packet of soup. And it's a complicated process, but they're doing it. There's a unique QR code on each packet of soup. And you can track your soup back to the exact farmer and see the certificates that was approved by the government. So you know that your ingredients are the ingredients that are actually in your product. And by doing that, they rebuild some consumer confidence, and they were able to get some market share back.
Excellent. Thank you.
Okay, so we'll go on to our next question. So what are the challenges with implementing blockchain across various supply partners and 3PLs?
Fantastic question. And that's what we're doing a lot today at the association, is trying to educate folks around how to maybe do it better or have a different approach. What we're seeing today is that people don't look at information the same way. And I think, Gary, you touched on this a bit earlier, right, around standards. Getting the information from myself and from you in the same way, maybe in the same format, or that we agree that one data point means the same thing, today is complicated. You touched on RFID earlier. We have certain standards in EDI, but even that's not perfect. And we've been doing EDI for almost 70 years now. It was invented for the Second World War, which is mind-blowing. And we're still using that technology. But, you know, making sure that we're talking the same way, even if we have different technologies, but that the information we're sharing means the same thing, is a big challenge today. The second bigger challenge that I see right now is people don't have a good handle on their own business processes. Yes, you have some mature companies that have everything mapped out perfectly, but data silos are what kills us every time, right? You know, think of freight forwarding. For those in freight forwarding, you know, just one department not talking with the other department. How often do we see that, right? Still today, that's nuts. So imagine trying to map out digitally your whole process so that you can program it and make it make sense on a blockchain, right? That's a big challenge. So where I think we need to go today to get ready for full-on implementation is start by mapping your business. Make sure that you're talking to you know, you're breaking down the silos. You need to break down those silos, open up your business, not to strangers, but within yourself, and have the operations person talk with the salesperson, talk with the IT person, talk with the finance person, talk with the leadership, and have everybody understand where information comes from, where it's going, and what you're doing with it. And that's, I think, priority number one.
I think you're describing really like the best
Pie
in
in the
class.
sky stuff, right?
Well, no, best in
No, it's
class.
not.
You start from a model of logically we should join up all these people, all these stakeholders in this process, so everybody understands what's going on, and we have a common set of definitions.
Yeah.
Often, certainly in implementations I've been involved in, culture plays a part in that. And I think if we can get alignment with all those stakeholders, we're kind of overcoming any cultural backfires. But as soon as you go outside your organization, you've gone through all the silo bashing things that you described there. Is there a best way of actually engaging with your ecosystem partners?
For me, it's all about vision. It's all about saying yes, or it's all about yes, I believe, right? If you're sold on the benefits, just do it. Go down that road. I mean, who would have thought that 30 years ago we would be sharing our entire business on the internet, right? Probably not, right? You weren't putting your whole business on an internet page or on a website or on a cloud server. Nobody thought of that. Today, it's a given. So believe in blockchain, understand what blockchain can do. You know, a lot of smarter people than I believe that it is a fantastic technology, that it is going to revolutionize supply chain, make it a lot more efficient, make it cleaner. There's still a lot of waste out there in what we do, in our resources, in our processes, and that blockchain is going to help solve some of that waste. So, you know, look at it today. Be an early adopter, be a believer, investigate, research, and dive right into it. And look around you for other people that are doing it. Live examples are going on today. People are doing it today. Talk to those folks. Fantastic examples. You know, look at the ups, look at the downs, and make a decision for yourself. But, you know, a lot of, like I said earlier, a lot of smart people are making it happen, and so can you.
Erik, it's It's a lot that I'm learning today. And the question that I have, probably the last question, is related to blockchains and their implementation. Because what we're learning today is that the blockchains are the key to implementing many or making many existing processes more efficient, especially in supply chain. So why is implementation of those solutions so slow? And just to give you a little bit more context, the only company in supply chain that publicly advertising blockchain solutions is Maersk with their trade lanes.
Mm-hmm.
And quite a number of companies joined that, movement, but I haven't seen much progress. So it would be interesting to learn from you if you see it differently. Thank you.
Change management, right? I think we all feel the pain of change management being the barrier that we hate the most. Well, I know I do. I'm a big fan of change and continuous improvement, but not everybody is. And that is what's keeping adoption from moving faster than what it could, because the technology is there to support it, but the willingness is not always there to support it. Again, breaking down those silos. A lot of people are scared to break down those silos because they're scared to lose something. But we all know that when we break down those silos, we break down the barriers, either from within an organization or with your trading partners, things go a lot smoother. And supply chains are there to make things smoother. And that's, again, how we compete and how we are successful. So break down those silos. Don't be afraid to take the dive and just make it happen.
Erik, it's just a kind of a question, given the fact that in the early stages of the pandemic, we were experiencing China shut down. We were just emerging into a lockdown, and then they kind of went back to work, and there were containers, and everyone was in a mad scramble to find alternative sources. Now imagine that we had a factory partner in Wuhan, and we blockchained everything up. As we try to move to new sources of product, that would have been quite challenging, wouldn't it? Especially if you're doing it in a bit of a rush, to actually make sure that blockchain integrity was all part of that. Because many people were saying, have you got a driver? Have you got a truck? Have you got some product? Right, ship it now, kind of thing, as opposed to let's just plan this out. Here's a contract. You need to do blockchain, blah, blah, blah. Oh, by the way, have you got any product? So the reality of some of these things that some poor retailers and manufacturers, etc., were going through, and if they were in a blockchain environment, I wonder how they would have almost had to step away from that to actually get hold of product. I don't know what your views of that kind of that short period. Let's call it a short period of time, where massive disruption was happening to supply chains, and multiple sources were being sought, and the blockchain, if it had been established, were kind of like, oh, that's for a day in a steady state. We've got real stuff to get on with. And how would blockchain actually kind of survive or help or enable that shift to a different supplier quickly?
Well, I think what 2020 showed us all is how important digitization was, right, in our supply chains. Be it work from home, be it having access to information, be it clouds, digitization of our processes, of our documentation, of our exchanges, of our handling of everything is what made the resilient supply chains actually thrive, and the weak supply chains die off and die a slow death. The unfortunate thing is, yes, we have different priorities in a state of crisis, and I think everybody understands that. We saw a bunch of great momentum of folks wanting to implement blockchain that said, okay, I have other priorities right now. But we also saw others, dive right in because they realized that this is okay, 2020 pandemic, there's going to be something else, right? There's going to be another pandemic or another volcano or another earthquake, and we need to act now. And I think that 2020 is what opened the eyes of a lot of folks, and hopefully, you know, we're going to see that move blockchain forward.
Yeah, great. Well, on that note, thanks for sharing this information, Erik. It's something that you're obviously passionate about. I feel like we've really just scratched the surface when it comes to blockchain, though. If our listeners are curious to know more about blockchain, what resources would you suggest that we tap into?
Contact us. You can reach us either on our website at www.cbsca.ca or send us an email at info@cbsca.ca. We'd be happy to chat with you.
Perfect. We'll put those links in the summary. And that's it. So thank you so much to the panelists for your questions. Big thank you to Erik. Really appreciate your time. And if you like this podcast, if you found the information helpful, please like and share this content. Until next time, thank you for joining.
Thank you.